welcome everybody. Tonight we will discuss preparation for not just Rosh Hashanah, but Yamim Narayim, Teshuvah, Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Seres Teshuvah, the whole package. And it's a very, very important approach. I think a lot of people don't necessarily look forward to this time. They almost feel like it's a bit of like a 3 weeks Teshuvah situation. Like, oh man, there's something big coming. It's not going to be fun. I'm going to have to be on my best behavior for 10 days. And Pas Yisrael, some people do Chol Yisrael. You got to really, pretend like you're an angel for a full 10 days. And then finally get back to real life. Sukkot, to get to party again, get to have some fun. But these days are kind of something a person doesn't look forward to. And that conception really comes from a misconception of how Teshuvah works. How does a person do Teshuvah? So that's what we're going to discuss tonight. What is the proper approach to doing Teshuvah? How does a person really do Teshuvah? And what's Rosh Hashanah all about? In fact, we'll already start from today. We get up in the morning and we say Slichos. The Sfaradim? No. Anyone Sfaradim? Okay, doing it since Rosh Chodesh Elul. 40 days straight of Slichos. So what do you do on Slichos? So the main part of Slichos is Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. You say the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. You say Hashem's 13 attributes of mercy. So what's that supposed to do? What's that supposed to do? If you say it over and over and over and over again, eventually it just magically makes you do Teshuvah. Does it make you better? Does it make Hashem better? Does he say, look, if you say it 30 times, then I'll forgive you? It's not like you say just please a bunch of times. What's the idea of the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim? Why did Hashem tell Moshe Rabbeinu? Again, where did they come from, Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim? So Moshe Rabbeinu, after the Chet HaEgel, right? The worst sin that ever occurred after this Chet of Adam Rishon. So Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to ask forgiveness from Hashem. And while he's there, Hashem says, I'll forgive you. So he says, wow, it's an Eis Ratzon. It's a special, auspicious time. I can ask for anything. So he says, Hashem, show me your ways. So Hashem says, I can't show you everything. A person can't live and see everything, but I'll show you something. And it says, very weird, it says Hashem wrapped himself in a talis like a Baal Tefillah. So Hashem wrapped himself in a talis, and he got up like he's the Baal Tefillah, and he davened, just like we do on Slichas. He davened the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. He taught Moshe Rabbeinu his 13 attributes of mercy, and he told Moshe Rabbeinu, anytime you're in trouble, anytime you need forgiveness, Aseh lefanai keseder zu. Do before me this order, this seder. If you do these Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, if you say them, if you wrap yourself up in a talis like I did, so then I'm going to forgive you. Then you're going to have this special auspicious moment. It's like this magical words that we say. Hashem suddenly, he was angry. He's like, oh, well, you said Yud Gimel Midas? Okay, now I'm calmed down, and now I'll give you whatever you want. That's what it sounds like. So what's the concept of Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim? It doesn't say you need to do Teshuvah. He didn't tell Moshe, do Teshuvah and I'll forgive you. He said, say the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, and then you'll get out of any situation, any trouble you're in. Of course, after Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim and Slichos, we say a vidui. So, right, we do the Achetz, we do a little mini Teshuvah, but that's not the Iker. That's not the most essential part. The essential part of Slichos, and you'll see on Yom Kippur, right, the Ilah, the height of the holiest day of the year, is we scream out Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. So what are these Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim? That's what we need to understand. Number 2 is we need to understand how to do Teshuvah. Okay? So the Baal Tanya writes in Tanya that if a person sins, so the sin is like the snake bite. So right, if you get bitten by a snake, you're not going to die from the 2 tiny holes that are in your hand. Right? It's not so dangerous to get 2 tiny holes in your hand. What kills a person when he gets bit by a snake? The venom. The venom goes through his body. So he says when a person does a chet, when he sins, so doing the sin is like the snake bite. Like it hurts, not so bad, you're going to recover. He says the venom is when a person becomes depressed because he sinned. Because he gets down on himself, he falls into depression, so he calls it mara shchora, which is like the dark bile. He falls into mara shchora, this dark depression. That's what the Yetzer Hara really wants. He wants the person to get depressed. He doesn't even just want him to sin. The sin is just what's called the hechi timtza in the Gemara. It's just a way to give him a little ouch. He can get over it in 2 seconds if he wanted to. But if he focuses on the sin, if he gets depressed, that's what he really wants. That's how you make a person fall. He gets depressed. So the Baal Tanya writes that anytime a person feels depression, it's for sure coming from the side of evil. It's always negative. Depression is negative. So you can ask, well, how do I do tshuva? Right? Tshuva says I have to do charata, I have to have regret. Right? It says you should cry, you should confess. It sounds like a really painful process. So the Baal HaTanya writes that the way you do tshuva, the way you know if you're doing tshuva correctly, is you don't get depressed, you get angry. And you use the word like angry, not like you're angry in a way that doesn't make sense. You're angry at the fact that you sinned. He says when you get angry, so he says that has chiyus. There's life. You're excited. You have energy. Anytime a person's down and like he's depressed, so he says that's coming from the side of evil. But fire, intensity, emotion, that comes from the side of kedusha. That can come from the holy side. So he says there's a time and a place. He says whenever you're feeling down and sad about something, he says rile yourself up and do tshuva. Use it to your benefit. Right? Use that you're being down, don't let it fall into depression. When you're down, you can go in two ways. You can get angry, you can get depressed. He says when you do tshuva, you need to be alive. You need to be alive to do tshuva. Okay? So he says, so all we learn from there, we won't get into the anger part because we're not going to learn Tanya tonight, but one clear rule that he sets is you cannot become depressed. You can't do tshuva when you're depressed. It's impossible. So if a person comes down and he's down on himself and he thinks, I'm nothing, I'm nobody, I'm no good, and I can't do anything right, I'm never going to be a tzaddik, so then he can't do tshuva. Can't do tshuva. Right? That's a big, big problem. Because most people think that that's how you do tshuva. So they really don't look forward to the Aser Simei Tshuva, because like those are days where I have to be sad. It's not days where I have to be sad. We'll see that it's just the opposite. Okay? So we need to understand how to do tshuva, and what's the secret of the Yigdal Midas Arachmim, and what's the secret of being Mamlech Hashem, that we coronate Hashem on Rosh Hashanah. What does it mean that we make Hashem our king? If you look on Rosh Hashanah, it's very interesting. You don't do any tshuva. There's no vidui on Rosh Hashanah. There's no confession. You don't do any tshuva on Rosh Hashanah. Tshuva is for Yom Kippur, the Aser Simei Tshuva. Although it's called the Aser Simei Tshuva, that means the 10 days of tshuva. So there's only 7 days in between. Rosh Hashanah is 2 days, right? Yom Kippur is 1 day. You have 7 days in between. It's called the 10 days of tshuva, but that's a misnomer because you don't do tshuva on Rosh Hashanah, right? The first 2 days there's no tshuva, but it says it's Aser Simei Tshuva. So it's tshuva, but it's not tshuva. It's an essential part of tshuva. It's part of the tshuva process, but it's not classic tshuva. There's no vidui, there's no confession, there's no tears. It's not that day. That's for Yom Kippur. That's for the 7 days in between. So what's Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah is going to be the most important ingredient to tshuva is Rosh Hashanah. The most important ingredient. You can't do tshuva properly unless you have a mini Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, you get the full Rosh Hashanah, a real Rosh Hashanah. But even during the year, if you want to do tshuva, you have to start with Rosh Hashanah. So what's Rosh Hashanah? What's it all about? Okay, so where we're going to be pulling most of this from, we're going to be learning the Ramchal tonight and Rabbi Nachman. Those are the two sources we're going to be learning. And the Ramchal is an amazing piece that I recommend you do yourself. You can probably learn this 100 times and it'll never get old, and there'll be more and deeper things you'll notice every single time. But it's amazing. It's called the Drush Be'inyan HaKivui that the Ramchal wrote. This is a sefer called Otzros Ramchal. It means like the treasury of the Ramchal. And it's a bunch of small writings of the Ramchal. The Ramchal was a fascinating tzaddik. He wrote his own plays. He was a playwright. He wrote plays. He wrote his Sfarim a lot of times as a conversation between the body and the soul, between the intellectual and the makubal. He writes everything in a very flowery, interesting way. And he also wrote short essays and poems. He was a poet himself. So he has many different interesting writings, and they gathered a lot of them that they found over the years, and they put them into the sefer called Otzros Ramchal. So he has here, it's just 2 pages. This is the whole thing. That's the whole thing. It's called Drush Be'inyan HaKivui. So it means it's his expounding on the idea of Kivui. Kivui means hope. Tikva. Tikva comes from the word, right? Hope. Kivui means hope. So he explains what is the idea of hope. Is hope a fundamental concept in Judaism? Right? You see, Kivisi l'shuascha Hashem. Right? I hope for your salvation. If you look through Tehillim, there's a lot of Kivisi el Hashem. Right? What does it say at the end of with David or Yishi? What we say then, right? It says, "Kivisi el Hashem, chazak kavei el Hashem, chazak v'yametz libecha v'kavei el Hashem." Right? That's like Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, and Sukkot. That's why we say that Tehillim. So the very end is hope in Hashem, strengthen yourself, and hope in Hashem. So we'll explain what that means as well. But there's a fundamental concept of hope, and you see it specifically by David HaMelech. It's in Tehillim a lot. Okay, so this is how he starts. It says, Lishuascha kivisi. So I hope for your salvation. That's what David HaMelech says to Hashem. Reishi sabriya betikva. The beginning of creation was with hope. Hashem created the world with this concept called hope. Shekol ha'tachtonim metzapim l'shifas elyonim al yedei tefila oshir. That the lower worlds will always be hoping for the higher worlds. They'll be hoping for Hashem through either davening or singing. Tefila oshir. It says, Bereshis bara Elokim. In the beginning, Hashem created Elokim, this concept called Elokim. Right? Rashi reads it, in the beginning, Hashem created. And it says, Bereshis bara Elokim. In the beginning, Hashem created this concept Elokim. Ein Reshis elatikva. The beginning means Hashem began the world with hope. He began creation with hope. Ein atzimtzum asi ki'im letzapo sheyichnos bo kav ein tov baruch hu. So in the beginning of the world, before Hashem created the world, so He was filling all of reality. It's called the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light. There was no room for anything to exist other than God. If anything wanted to exist other than God, it would be nullified immediately. The Baal Tanya says it's like trying to have a candle, like the flame of a candle in the middle of the sun. Can you imagine the flame of a candle in the middle of the sun? Like, there's no flame of a candle, it just gets nullified. It gets absorbed into the sun. There's nothing there. So he says that when Hashem fills all of reality, He's so intense, He's so infinite, so nothing else can exist. So if Hashem wanted to create the world, so what did He need to do first? He needed to do what's called the tzimtzum. He needed to constrict Himself. He needed to create a cavity or a vacuum, which is a conceptual vacuum, which means He hid Himself. He hid Himself and created a part of creation, a part of the universe that was vacant of His revealed presence. So some people think like Hashem like sucked out like a big bubble in the middle of creation. It doesn't work like that because Hashem is everywhere. Nothing can exist without Hashem. So it wasn't that He put a bubble. He basically put on a mask in the middle of creation. He made a part of creation where you can't see Him. He hides Himself. Now, in that vacated space that's called the tzimtzum, right? So He created this vacated space. So Hashem created this hope, this yearning. That space was yearning for Hashem. It was empty of Hashem, and Hashem is all that exists, so it was yearning for Hashem. So Hashem did what's called the kav. In Kabbalah, they say there's a kav. The kav means He put almost like a little straw, He inserted like a little straw into this hole, and He put in a very limited amount of light from the outside. Right, the outside is still infinite godly presence. So He put this little straw into this little hole. Again, we're using this so you can conceptualize it, but it wasn't a physical idea, it's a spiritual idea. So you have this big hole, and He puts in this kav, this little line, and then the line brought in this Or Ein Sof, this divine light, and that created all the universes that exist within creation that we have today. Right? And there's a whole detailed explanation, Eitz Chaim by the Arizal, how all of that took place. But what the Ramchal is saying is that Hashem created the vacated space. So the first thing that existed in that area that was almost devoid of godliness was a yearning, an expectation, a hope for Hashem. It was hoping for Hashem. There was a hope for Hashem that was placed there. And then Hashem put in the kav. Kav means a line. It means you draw a line. A line is a kav. So put in the kav, that little straw that kind of sucked in that kedusha, that light that filled that hope. Kav is from the lashon of, when you bring it, kivui. Kav means kivui. Kivui means hope. So Hashem put in that little drop of hope. The hope was there. It was yearning for Hashem. And He put in that little drop so the hope was fulfilled. That's how the whole creation started, before anything, with hope. Even in the Medrash, if you look through the Torah, it says, Hadeshayim amdu al pesach hakarka. When Hashem created vegetation in the world, when He created plants and plant life, so He didn't create all the trees and all the bushes, and all the fruits. What did He create? He created all of the plants underground, and they were waiting to break through the surface. They were all there waiting to break through the surface. They were hoping. So He created this hope and anticipation until Adam Rishon came and davened for rain. Hashem wanted to wait for Adam Rishon. Tefillah is hope. Adam Rishon actualized that hoping, that yearning. He davened for rain, the rain came down, and then they pierced through. So Hashem created the whole world, set up, but missing that last step, hoping for that last step so that it could come to fruition. So Hashem created the world with the ingredient of this hope, this expectation, it's an anticipation, a yearning, a waiting. It's waiting, that's hope. That's how Hashem created the world. He could have just created the trees, like they pop up, everything's ready to go. I think that's how you picture it. But Chazal tell us that it was created with hope. So he says, now he's going to tell how you apply this to a person. Hamekave tamid b'simcha bli tzar. So someone who has hope. You could call this just having a positivity. Right? He's not a pessimistic person, positive person. So he's always b'simcha. He will always be in happiness, bli tzar. He'll never be in pain. He'll never be in worry. Person who's worried and he's concerned and he doesn't have hope. So he is sick and he doesn't have any medication. There's nothing he could do. But someone who's hopeful, who has positivity, so he's never bitzar. He's always hoping. He knows that the salvation is right around the corner. It's right there. And even if it tarries, even if he's waiting and it's not coming, so he waits for it. He knows it's coming. Right? That's what we say about Mashiach. Even though it's tarrying, it's waiting, it's not here yet, you have to hope for it. Nimsa tikva mechayoso. So the tikva, that hope, really gives him life. Gives him life. If you don't have hope, you'll die. There's a famous individual who wrote a book during the Holocaust. He wrote it after the Holocaust, based on his experience in the Holocaust, called Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl. Has anyone ever heard of Viktor Frankl? So Viktor Frankl he was already before the Holocaust. He was a famous psychologist, and he was a super genius in university. He was not religious, but he went into the Holocaust. And during the Holocaust, he almost looked at what he was experiencing in the concentration camps as a giant laboratory experiment. Because he was looking at everything that was happening through the lens of psychologists, trying to analyze who was surviving, who was dying, what kept people going, what motivated the individuals that succeeded, what had people degenerate into thieves and animals, and that they lost all their sense of humanity, and what kept people strong. So he created, at the end, after the Holocaust, he created his theory called logotherapy. Logo in Latin means meaning. And he found that the people who survived were the ones who found meaning in their lives. Anyone that thought that there was no meaning, they were just suffering, and that there was no hope, really the word should be hope. Anyone that, he writes there, anyone that lost hope, they had nothing to hope for. Like anyone who thought, he said his hope was he was hoping for his wife, to be reunited with his wife, who had already died in the concentration camps way before he was actually freed, but he didn't know that. So he was hoping for his wife. He said that's what kept him going. Anyone that had something to hope for, they survived. Not everyone, but the only people that survived were those that had hope. Anyone, he said, it was very scary. He said anytime you saw a person that was in the bunk and they called him out to work and the guy just laid there and wouldn't go to work, they said you knew, not only, even if the Germans didn't find him, even if they didn't beat him and punish him and kill him, he would die within a few days. And they saw that he'd be laying there and he'd just start smoking a cigarette, like he'd take his last cigarette out, smoking, he's like, that's it. He saw the guy gave up hope, and the guy's body would just degenerate and the guy would die within a few days. Because he said that once they lost that hope, so then their soul just ebbed out of their bodies. There's nothing left to keep them going. It says here, hope is the most important ingredient that a person can have in his avodas Hashem, in surviving. Right? It says if you don't have hope, so immediately you die. And death means you remain far from Hashem. Without hope, you can't get close to Hashem. And look how intense he gets. And he'll be punished that he didn't hope and trust in Hashem. He didn't hope in Hashem. Anyone who hopes, so Hashem will be his light in the darkness, and he will grant him salvation in this world or the next. Not guaranteed it's going to be in this world. He says in this world or the next. So he says, someone who has hope, even if he only has a few maisim tovim, he's not doing very well in life. He's not learning Torah, not doing mitzvahs. So he'll never lo yevosh. He won't falter. That those who hope in me will not falter. The poor man has hope. Even if someone who's missing mitzvahs and Torah, he has hope. It's very interesting. Hashem will reveal himself to that person if he wants it, if he trusts in Hashem, if he believes in Hashem. He'll remove all the person's sins. And that's the end, that's the ultimate rectification. That if the Jewish people have hope that through all the dark exiles, they will ultimately be redeemed, that's what's going to get them to the finish line. The hope itself. This is why I was going to plan this as the end of the Mashiach series. They kind of go together. Because the way to bring Mashiach is to hope for him. Even though he tarries and we're waiting, you have to believe he's coming. If you believe he's coming, then he comes. That's what brings Mashiach. That's what brings the salvation. From the beginning of creation, right? Sof maaseh b'machshavat chila. The very beginning, the thought in the beginning will ultimately be the end. The thought in the beginning was Hashem created the world, lacking that last step. It was yearning, it was waiting. The very beginning, right? He removed himself from creation so that he could put in the kav, he could put in that bit of hope, that vacated space was hoping for Hashem. And he created the plants right at the precipice, right at the surface, so that they could hope to break through into the world. Everything was created with hope. So that's really the key ingredient for bringing it to its ultimate fruition, to bring Mashiach, is that a person needs hope. He needs to believe. And the end of hope is that Hashem will remove all the sin. That's the cover for the king. Now we're getting a little hint to Rosh Hashanah here. Right? The most amazing kavod and honor you can give to a king is that you hope in him. Right? You only will hope in the most powerful king. Right? If you have no, like you're at the verge of death, right? Everything looks terrible. So if there's a king that's not really all powerful, so you're not going to put your hope in him. There's not much you can do. But no matter how bad it gets, if this king can control everything, he's omnipotent. So then you'll put your hope in him. So the greatest honor you can give to the king, that's what it means to coronate Hashem, to make him your king, is to hope in him. If you hope in Hashem, that's the greatest manifestation of his kingship. Emuna tikva, that to have emuna in that king. And that is what it says in the Gemara when the Torah is being reduced to different principles, 13 and 10 and I think 7. It's reduced to a few principles, and then it says Chabkuk hemidu al achas. And Navi Chabakuk put the whole Torah into one statement. Tzaddik be'emunaso yechya. A tzaddik will live through his faith, which means his hope. He's translating here faith meaning hope. There's a little bit difference between faith and hope. Faith means I believe in Hashem, in his powers. Hope means I believe he'll save me. I believe he'll use those powers to save me. It's very different, right? You can believe that there's a president out there that can grant you amnesty and he can get you out of jail. But is he going to do it? So I don't know, I'm not sure. But then there's a person who's in jail and he believes that he's going to get saved. He really believes it, honestly. If you asked him, he said, for sure. The president's going to grant me the amnesty. He's going to take me out. I'm going to get pardoned. So that's the person who the president loves, right? Who the king loves. Because the king says, whoa, if he hopes in me, even when it looks hopeless, and the king really could get him out of anything, right? We're assuming it's Hashem. He really could get you out of anything. So that's an honor to the king. He says, I'm going to save this guy, even if he's a sinner. He said, even if he's a sinner. Hashem says, that's my guy. That's my guy. That's the whole reason I created the world. That's the whole reason I hid myself from the very beginning. I only created the vacated space to put in the kav, to put in the hope. I created the whole system for that guy that's going to hope in me. Forget what he did. As long as he hopes in me, so then I'll wipe away all the sins. As he says, Ma'avir kol pshaecha, I'll wipe away all the sins. He says, V'zehu soda tshuva. And this is the secret of tshuva. Shu mamish shev al makor. That means you return to your source. V'sitra achra lo yichalalo. And the forces of evil will have no sway over you. V'nemar shuva yisrael ad Hashem. Like the pasuk says, return Klal Yisrael all the way to your source, to Hashem. Kach, ha-mekaveh hu mamish bokeya bekav tikvaso. The mekaveh, the one who hopes, he breaks through all of the boundaries and the borders, he breaks through all the walls with his kav, which is like, that's like the line, that's like that straw, that little thing that pierces through. So that's your kav, that means hope. He could break through anything with his hope. Nekev v'sedek, and he makes a tiny little hole. La'alos tachas kisei hakavod, and with that little hole, he can get all the way to the kisei hakavod. And that's what it means to hope for Hashem's salvation. Lishuascha, for your salvation, kivisi Hashem. I hoped Hashem. Right? That's what David HaMelech says. Like, why is he telling instead? He says, that's how I got the salvation. Because I hoped in it. If you hope in it, so then it comes. If you don't hope in it, it won't come. And there's that saying, think well and all will be well. So there is truth to that in a certain sense. That Hashem says, it's not just that you believe Hashem could help you. You have to believe that he will help you. And he'll save you. So that's the pasuk that we say right at the end of David Ori is Kavei el Hashem Chazak v'yametz libecha v'kavei al Hashem. It's a very weird pasuk. It says, hope in Hashem, strengthen yourself, and hope in Hashem. So I already hoped in Hashem. I strengthen myself, hope in Hashem. So Rashi says something amazing. He says something like amazing. He says, kavei al Hashem, hope in Hashem, and then let's say it doesn't happen. You hope in Hashem, right? The guy's in the Holocaust, he hopes in Hashem, right? He's going to the gas chamber, chas v'shalom, right? He hopes in Hashem, something's going to happen, doesn't happen. Suddenly, right, the cyanide starts coming up and this guy he sees he's not going to make it. So it says, chazak yametz ilecha, strengthen yourself, v'kavei al Hashem, and hope in Hashem again. What do you mean hope in Hashem again? He's about to die. Let's say he's not going to get saved. So Rashi says, what does it mean? Kavei al Hashem, chazak yametz ilecha v'kavei al Hashem. Maybe the whole reason that he's in that situation is that he hopes in Hashem. That's the goal. Even if he leaves this world, the whole situation, his whole life was designed so that he hopes in Hashem. So that he hoped in Hashem. It didn't work. Strengthen yourself. Hope in Hashem again. Because you weren't hoping for the salvation. This is the deepest level. Is that it wasn't about the salvation. It was about the hope. You hope for the salvation. Right? So the salvation is the ikr. That's the main thing. And the hope is the means to getting to the salvation. That's what most people would assume. So they have it backwards. The salvation and tzara and the difficulty was only to get you to the hope. The hope was the goal. In this world, the hope is the goal. If you have that hope, even if you leave this world, so when you get to the next world, Hashem will wipe away all the sins. Nothing goes with you. Hashem says, you hoped in me, even to the very bitter end, when it looked like there was no hope. You strengthened yourself and you hoped again, when there was no chance. You hoped. That's the hope. That was the whole goal. That was the whole point. You succeeded. That's it. You made it. You got to the hope. So that's what the Ramchal says. It goes more, but that's for tonight. That's what the Ramchal says is the essence of hope. It's the essence of Teshuvah. So now you understand, why do we say the Yidgil Midas HaRachamim during Slichos? Why do we just say it over and over and over? Right? If you count how many times you say it through the end of Yom Kippur, probably like 100 times. Say it 100 times. So what? I'm not changing it. I'm not doing anything. You know what you're doing? You're reminding yourself and believing that Hashem is Kel Rachum V'Chamim. Hashem is merciful. Hashem is kind. Hashem is forgiving. You're believing it. You're creating that sense of hope. You won't hope in someone. Let's say you know there's a king. He's a stern judge. Right? He does not let anything go. You slip up, you make a mistake, you're in jail. Right? You make a bad mistake, you're on the gallows. That's it. He does not let up. Hashem is a strict judge. There's an aspect of Hashem. He's Melech HaMishpat, right? He's the king of judgment. He's a judge. But he's also the king of mercy and Rachamim. He's Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu comes first. First he's your father, then he's your king. He's still a king, you're the prince though. So he's your father and he's your king. And he's not just a king. His whole kingship is based on the fact that he's a Kel Rachum V'Chan, that he forgives, he has mercy. So you remind yourself, and if you believe in that, that's what Rosh Hashanah is all about. Rosh Hashanah is making Hashem your king. What does that mean? It's recognizing that Hashem can control anything. That's Trua, right? Sorry, these are Tkiya, Trua, or Tkiya Shvarim, Tkiya. Right? Every time you blow, in the morning we do for all of El, a Tkiya, a solid blast. A Shvarim, a Trua, Shvarim is like do, right? And then a Tkiya. So what is that? Why do we blow those sounds? So Chazal already say that the Shvarim and the Trua are supposed to be crying, weeping. That's why it sounds like weeping. There's machlokes. How do people weep? Do they weep like like a sob, or do they go That's that. It's machlokes in the Gemara. That's why we do both. It's not clear how people cry. Some people cry both, right? They go, right? Like little kids. That's how they cry. So that's why we do it in the middle. What's a tekiya and a tekiya? So it's mamish, right? Kavei el Hashem, chazak emes ibecha v'kavei el Hashem. A tekiya is the single solid blast. That's a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's kul echad. It's perfect. It's pristine. It's a single blast. Then you hope in Hashem, then it all falls apart. Don't worry. You gotta hope in Hashem at the end. Tekiya, shvarim, trua, tekiya. That's what it's supposed to remind you of. That the world was built perfect, or Ein Sof. Then you have this vacated space You have the Chet of Adam Rishon, the Chet of Egel, everything falls apart. Trua comes from the word Ra. Trua means Ra, means broken. Ra comes from the word broken, means you broke, when Ra, evil, it broke creation. It broke it. Everything's shattered. But Hashem is the Melech. So the Melech, the king, he's going to put it back together. He started perfect, broke, he's going to put it back together. That's Kaveil Hashem, Chazak Ve'emet Tzivecha Be'Kaveil Hashem. Right? Keep hoping. Hope in the beginning, hope at the end. So now we'll learn a piece of Rabbi Nachman. So Rabbi Nachman is going to tell a person, how does he do Teshuvah on Rosh Hashanah? Right? What's the first step to Teshuvah? Teshuvah on Rosh Hashanah, right? We don't do Teshuvah on Rosh Hashanah, but this is the aspect of Teshuvah that you do on Rosh Hashanah. You make him the king, you hope in Hashem, you recognize he's merciful, he can do anything, you put your faith in him, that king is going to save me. Right? That's Rosh Hashanah. Then you could do Teshuvah. So he says, Da, ki tzarech ladun es kol adam lekaf schus. So Rabbi Nachman says, this is a famous statement of Chazal, you have to judge every person favorably. Va'afilu mishu rasha gamor. Even someone who's completely wicked. It's very interesting because that's actually not the halacha. Someone who's completely wicked, you actually don't have to judge favorably. You actually judge him the opposite. If he's a rasha gamor, so even if he does something that looks like he's doing something good, you actually judge him not favorably. You say he must have some ulterior motives. Rabbi Nachman's not going in the simple understanding. We'll have to see what he means, that even rasha gamor, you have to judge favorably. Doesn't mean you think everything he does is perfect. What does it mean? Yeah, but he's not what he's going. He's saying even if you knew. It means you need to search within that person and you need to find that little good that exists within him. There's a tiny piece of him that he's not a Rasha. Even if a Rasha Gomer means he's a total Rasha. Gomer means complete. But there's got to be a tiny piece of him where he's not wicked. And through that small good that you find in him, and look how he says, Danoto lekaf. Literally it means, we translate you judge him favorably. But it literally means, the danoso, you judge him, lekaf zchus. Kaf is a kaf moznayim. They used to have a scale, and there was like two plates in it. They're called the kaf. It's called the kaf. The kaf means like a spoon. They were holding them. Kaf moznayim is like a scale. So danoto, lekaf zchus means that you weigh his scale on the side of merit. So you weigh him to the side of merit. So he says, through finding that little good in him, so you weigh his scale to the side of merit. You have the power to actually give him merit and have him merit his judgment, have him come out clean. And you can actually make him do tshuva. This is a very, very deep concept of what a tzaddik can do. If a tzaddik sees a person and he says, look at this guy, he's just sinning, he's a bad guy, he's making mistakes, he has no hope. Right? So you know what that does to the person? He actually can danoso the kaf chova. He can tip the scale by him judging, because Hashem gave Klal Yisrael the power that their judgment affects Hashem's judgment. So if you judge a person unfavorably, it causes Hashem to also judge him unfavorably. It actually tips the scales against him. But if you see a rasha, a wicked person, and a tzaddik sees a wicked person, like Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, right? Whenever he saw a wicked person, he always found some merit for that person. So if you find that merit, Hashem almost, zooms in on it because you found it, and you actually can tip his scale to the side of merit. You can change his judgment by finding the good inside of him. So he says, even a rasha, apapishu rasha, how could it be that he's a Jew? There's got to be some good in him. There's no Jew that has no good in him. How could it be that in his life he never did any good deed? It's impossible. He must have done something. And through that you find that little bit of good that's left in him. And in that tiny bit of good, he's not wicked. He's not a rasha there. And you judge him favorably. You actually can tip his scales. Suddenly he'll do tshuva. You can make a person do tshuva. It's like crazy, without even saying a word to him. Like, of course I can make a person do tshuva. I can teach him all the Torah, and I can tell him why what he's doing is not okay, and I'll inspire him. No, you don't even say a word. You can be standing 100 feet away, and you can make a person do tshuva. How? You look at him and find that tiny bit of good that's within him. Hopefully the guy's not that much of a rasha. Hopefully there's a lot of good that's inside of him. Right? Most people it's pretty easy. You find the good that's inside of him, it activates it inside of his neshama. Somewhat like it turns on the light. Without verbalizing it. This is you, in your head, how you judge a person. You can actually tip a person's scale to the side of zchus. This is why you want to be in a minyan with positive people, right? With optimistic people. You don't want to be in a negative minyan because people looking around, oh, that guy's talking, oh, he's not davening, he's not paying attention, he's sleeping in shul. That's not good. He is going to actually tip your scale. Like, that's what's scary. Or if you have a guy that's in shul that's always looking for the positive in people, so he can elevate everyone. He can be choser everyone b'teshuvah. That's what tzaddikim do. Tzaddikim, when you go to a tzaddik, so you can sometimes leave the tzaddik. I don't know if anyone's ever had a yechidus, a private meeting with a tzaddik, but you leave and you're like, I want to be kaddish, I want to be holy, I want to be better, I don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to do that anymore. And the tzaddik could have said like nothing to you. Bracha v'atzlacha. Right? You just saw his face. But he was judging the person positively. When you walked in there, you know what he did? He found that little good in you, and he flipped on the switch. That's what he can do to a person. So look what he says after that. He says, "V'chein tzarich ha'adam limtzo gam be'atzmo." And it's not just in other people. It's even in the person himself. He's a yadua shetzarich ha'adam lizar me'od lios besimcha tamid. Because it's known that a person needs to constantly be in a state of joy. To push away sadness here means the sadness of depression, very, very far away. He shouldn't let any sadness enter into his life. And even if you look at yourself and you can't find any good, you say, this was a terrible year, a terrible week, a terrible day, and he just sees filled with sins. And the Yetzer Hara wants him to fall into depression, like we said in the beginning. That's the venom. That's how it gets you. Chas v'shalom. It says it's asur to fall into depression. You're not allowed to become depressed. That's forbidden. Asur. He needs to find in himself a little bit of good. He needs to find something he's proud of. How could it be? He didn't do in his whole life anything good. He did something good for sure. And even though he looks at that good thing, and then he says, you know what, that good thing wasn't really so good. I did it because of this, I did it because of that, I was hoping to get paid. Right? He says, that good, I didn't have a lot of kavanah, it wasn't such a good mitzvah. He says, no, look in that broken and battered mitzvah and find the good in that. Right? Where was the good part of that? No way that whole mitzvah was all bad. No way the mitzvah was 100% bad. Even if it was 90% bad. So find 10% that was positive in that mitzvah. There must be a point of good in that mitzvah. And you need to search it. That's how you can make yourself come to simcha and happiness. Look what he says. And through this, that he searches it himself and he finds that bit of good, then he can actually tip his scale and switch himself from being guilty to being innocent. Then he can do tshuva. Until he does that, he can't do tshuva. He's trapped in his own prison that he's built for himself, and he can't tip the scale because he thinks he's a Rasha. Right? He's in depression. You can't do tshuva when you're depressed. That's what Baal Tanya said. If you're depressed, so then your Yetzer Hara is in control of you. To get into the world of tshuva, you need to shift from the Yetzer Hara to the Yetzer Tov. So how do you shift? So you have to find some good in yourself. You have to move into simcha. You can't get into simcha unless you find good. That's Rosh Hashanah. Right? That's why Rosh Hashanah you don't do tshuva. Because Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the Aseret Yimei Tshuva. Right? All 10 days are tshuva. Just there's 2 days where you don't do any vidui. You don't confess. You don't focus on anything negative. You say Hashem's the king. You say Yud Gimel Midas Arachamim. He's full of mercy, and that makes it that you're full of hope. Right? Now you're full of hope. You're full of hope. So now I'm a hopeful person. I'm optimistic. And I know that Hashem's going to save me. Now who am I? So now you start doing tshuva. Well, I have a little bit of good in me. Right? There's something that I'm proud of. I'm a servant of the king. The king chose me. I'm his servant. And then you think about, what did you do for the king lately? Well, there's lots of things you probably did for the king. Okay, they're not so good. Well, there's a little bit of good in that. Something in that mitzvah was good. You find, and you isolate positivity. You isolate optimism. That's Rosh Hashanah. You're isolating positivity and optimism. You're recognizing that the king is your father. Imagine you're in a court case, right? And you know you probably are guilty, right? You know you're probably guilty. You probably did it, and you're about to go see the judge. You don't know who the judge is, but you know that it's a capital punishment. You might not survive this court case, and it really is pretty much going to depend on the judge. There's no jury. You're in Russia, right? No jury there. So whatever the judge decides, that's what's going to happen. So, right, you're shaking, you're walking in, there's the first day of the court case, and suddenly you see who gets up to the stand. It's your father. You're like, oh, nobody else knows, and he gives you like a wink, right? And then they start the whole court case. Right? That's what Rosh Hashanah is all about. Right? Rosh Hashanah is, you're about to get to Yom Kippur, like the Seres Teshuvah, about to get to the very scary moment where like the judge is going to sit on his throne, he's going to decide life or death. Rosh Hashanah is, phew, it's Avinu Malkeinu. He's my king, but I'm the prince. So he's not just the king, he's also my father. And not only is he the king, he's most merciful, forgiving, Rachmanas, he has ultimate rachamim, endless rachamim and kindness. He's that kind of king. So imagine how good you're going to feel. That's Rosh Hashanah. You should be flying on cloud 9 on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is not a sad time. The Navi said that after Rosh Hashanah, when the Navi was Ezra, after Ezra had called all the people to do Teshuvah, and they were crying and crying. So after they're crying, he said, stop crying. Go home. Eat delicious foods. Celebrate. Hashem is forgiving. Right? You have to realize Hashem wants you. He said, you can't be depressed on Rosh Hashanah. Ezra was telling him this. He says, if you're depressed on Rosh Hashanah, if you keep crying, so then you missed Rosh Hashanah. You can't do Teshuvah until you pull yourself out of the hole. Rosh Hashanah is pulling yourself out of the hole. It's the whole beginning of the process. It's finding the hope, the kav. Right? The kav is that line of hope. You have the hope, then you can break through. Once you have the hope, then you have optimism, then you have simcha, and now you can do Teshuvah. That's what Rosh Hashanah is all about. So, should be zocher to remember the words of the Ramchal, that hope is what can tip a person's scale. Hope, he said, even if the person's in Russia, hope, he hopes in the king, optimistic. Not just Hashem has the power to save me, he will, he's going to save me. And if you see he's not saving you, chazak v'yanbetz libecha v'kaveil Hashem. Strengthen yourself and you hope again. There's no such thing as stopping to hope, even if it's hopeless. So the whole goal is to become hopeful. So you have to strengthen the kivui, strengthen the tikva. You have to strengthen the hope in Hashem. If you hope in Hashem, then you activate that simcha, that davar tov within you. You can find that nekuda tova, as Rabbi Nachman calls it. You find that point of goodness within you. Say, the king is going to save me. Why is he going to save me? Because I did good. I did a lot more bad. It doesn't matter. I'm not focusing on that now. I'm focusing on the good. I'm seeing the good in myself. Then you're going to have suddenly these positive goggles on. You're going to see good in everybody else as well. Because usually, when a person, the way he feels is how he sees the world. You have a bad day, and suddenly everybody hates you. Everybody's mean, like all around you, and you start seeing negativity all around you. Because the way that you're feeling is the way that you perceive the world. And it might be true that it'll actually be a bad day. People are going to be mean to you. You know that grumpy guy walks around, nobody smiles at him. Because he didn't smile at them.
Guy cuts you off and then this.
Yeah, but I'm saying it might, but he brought the bad day on himself. You can control how the universe treats you based on how you look at the universe. That's what he's saying here. That's Kavei al Hashem. If you have hope, so then the salvation comes. Mashiach's waiting for people to hope in Mashiach. He's not going to come until you hope in Mashiach. Hope means I believe he's for sure coming. Even though he tarries, even though it's taking forever, and we're suffering, and many people died, even though they were hoping, they died, they did not get there. But no, he's still coming. He's still coming. He's for sure not coming, he's still coming. You're about to leave the world, he's for sure coming. That moment, that last second, he's going to come. That's what can bring Mashiach. That's what can bring a person's personal Yeshua. So we should be zocher. This Rosh Hashanah should be a day of simcha, should be a day of hope. We should recognize that Hashem is on our team. Avinu Malkeinu. First he's your father, then he's your king. And even as a king, he's a very merciful king. He has Rachmanis, he has patience, and he wants the person to succeed. Then we'll find the good in ourselves, and that will be the beginning of the process of Teshuvah.